We've now got John Sykes. John Sykes will be known to a lot of you people around this area. John's an agronomist in Albury. John's encouraged the use of the most appropriate technology to maximise farm sustainability and profitability, as well as financial monitoring of farm performance. John conducted some of the really early experiments to understand the problems of acid soils and the effect of lime, and was among the first to advocate the use of gypsum in clay soils. Please welcome John.
Thanks very much for the invitation to both the CMAs. I've had a very long history with bugs, actually, as you can see, because I've got no hair left. I remember when I was probably about 15 years old getting into trouble from the contractors when I didn't make a good enough lime pellet on the Ladino clover and wouldn't go through the machinery. And the very first trial that I ever did, that I ever monitored, I've got to say I didn't actually put it down, when I first came to Albury, way back too long ago to remember, was actually with a thing called vascular arbuscular mycorrhizas, which was the brand new thing that everybody was fooling about with back in the 70s. I remember what a fool of a trial it was. 6 months later we actually went back and tried to find them. We couldn't find them because basically the ones that were already in the soil, which we'd destroyed by putting thousands of dollars worth of bromide sterilisation through it, had recolonised and had come back. That may have forced me into conventional agriculture for the next 30 years, an experience like that. I've got a few messages. I think that there's a big range of farming systems in whatever we're talking about. But the best conventional systems are going to be as good as any other system for soil biology. And really, to me, soil biology is very resilient. We know it's resilient because we have it even though we've got a climate like we've got at the moment. We've just had 5 years of drought, we've had a record flood, we're still going to be out there, we've still got lots of soil biology. It's a very resilient thing. We actually aren't dealing with something that's not resilient. We've exposed it to all sorts of things in the last 30 years, fertiliser, no fertiliser, drenches, all sorts of things, and we still haven't managed to kill it. So we've still got a very resilient system sitting there that we've got to do, we've got to maximise it, but it's still extremely resilient. And lastly, there's a need for balance. And by balance I mean that we will all, regardless of what system you use, do some things that are not going to be good for soil biology. It doesn't matter what you do, it's how many of those, how many you get right, rather than getting everything right, that will really move you, whatever system you've got, into good soil biology. So that's all I'm going to look at, some definitions, look at the benefits from here, just maintaining it. Lastly, looking at what I think is possible, the current industries and some comments upon those for the conventional farmers around, and then obviously the future. I want to make a few definitions to begin with because I'm probably defining things slightly differently than some of the other people, and my feeling is that there's confusion. What I'm talking about when I'm talking about soil biology is the living portion of the soil. People try to put soil biology and soil carbon and soil all sorts of things. I'm trying to keep my talk to soil biology. As far as I know, it's about 1 to 5% of the total carbon store in the soil is soil biology, and that's about where it is. Looking at total or plant organic matter is what you'd measure in a soil test. You get back your Walkley Black or whatever it is, soil test measure, that's what you're measuring. You're measuring your total soil organic carbon, which you convert to soil organic matter, multiplying it by 2 basically to get soil organic carbon. So that's what you measure in your soil test, is total. But soil organic matter, I'm really trying to confer that to the long-term material, the humus, the heavy fraction organic carbon, the stuff that's going to last for a long time. Now this is following the work of Clive Kirkby, who seems to be very pedantic about this. Unfortunately I can't get myself away from being a bit interchangeable in these things, so I apologise if I make mistakes. Biology really is about balance. Good biology is good farming. And we've got a lot of things being revealed today about the research is really telling us a whole heap of new things. We've heard today about a lot of new things coming up. We've got to incorporate those as quickly as possible into agriculture. It doesn't matter what sort of agriculture we have, we've got to incorporate those. We're now also seeing a few products, particularly what they call the nutrient biologicals, starting to give relatively consistent performances in actual product trials. So we are starting to see a few products actually performing well in our experimentation system. But it is a motherhood statement. Soil biology tends to be used as a motherhood statement. So we've got some negatives as well. We haven't had a lot of great breakthroughs in the last little while that are really good for conventional agriculture. The field, unfortunately, is full of dodgy products. I don't mind saying this, I've been dealing with dodgy products since the early 80s, and some of the dodgy products I think have come up renamed 4 times now. They didn't work originally, they don't work under the new name. It doesn't matter what you do, dodgy products are a field in this field, and I just cannot, and I spend half my life being frustrated about the same ones turning up all the time. And lastly, the silver bullet effect has been talked about in both systems. You don't want to farm for the chemical company, but you also don't want to farm for the compost tea company. You're farming for your own benefit to make your own use. But all these negative things, I think, make a lot of us advisors very cautious about looking at farming, about advising in this field. Too many dodgy products, too much uncertainty. Let's look at the benefits. Obviously, they've already been outlined. A lot of people have done it far better than what I can. Our nutrient recycling is really absolutely vital to us. Soil organic matter build-up with all of its wouldn't be possible without soil biology. And obviously, our nitrogen system is really based very firmly on this. We can actually put some numbers to it. Because I'm a consultant, I love numbers. In our pasture systems, 100% of our nitrogen comes from soil biology. We put very little, except in dairying, very, very little comes from anywhere else. Despite the fact that everybody says we're putting urea on, we're still relying on soil biology for roughly 60% of the nitrogen that goes into our cropping system. So even in a conventional system, we're still relying heavily on nitrogen from the free bacterial system for that. A lot of this, of course, is we're relying very heavily on it to recycle our nutrients and a lot of our trace elements. So we are very heavily reliant on it, even in a conventional system. And these are the John Sykes extremely rough numbers back of envelope type calculations, which some of you will be used to. But very roughly, around we're talking about nearly $5 million a year between the two catchments, which I think is the area of the two catchments. And when you work that out, it's somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a farm is what the contribution of soil biology is just in nutrient recycling. Now, most of you would love that in your own pocket, and that's where it is. It's not in the fertilizer company or anywhere else, but that's about what the numbers come to when you actually work them out as to what the numbers are. And clearly they're protecting a fairly big industry as well, because that's the total value of production. So just to put some numbers to it, it's a big number when you start looking at it. What are the limits? And I thought I'd better say something about it. I have assumed in this that we don't have a lot of limits in soil biology, that we can in fact boost it up. I may be wrong in that now. I've assumed that. But there are limits when we talk about organic matter. Okay. So really, so long as we give our soil biology food, subject it to the right temperatures and water all at once, we're going to get it to go. I've probably got that round the wrong way, but we want probably more fungi as opposed to bacteria. We probably need a bit more of those, and we need a grass system to be able to get that. So probably we're looking at our maximum biological effects in the spring. Nobody should try looking for biology in summer because I don't think it's going to be here, it's too dry. But when we look at plant organic carbon, it's definitely limited. This is the work of Baldock, slightly modified to try and include our two soils. And you can see here that for about a 700 millimetre rainfall, we're probably going to get our organic carbon somewhere between 2 and 2.25%, and that's probably the limit. That's what the people are telling us now is about the limit. You can see up here at 1,000 millimetres, we're going to be able to get right up here into these sorts of numbers. But there is a limit to soil, to accumulations of soil organic carbon. And this is the other one that's going to limit us, how much nitrogen, phosphorus and sulphur we're going to have to tie up to tie that organic carbon up. So if you've got 4% soil organic matter, that's the permanent stuff, you've got tied up roughly 5 tonnes of nitrogen, about 1.1 tonne of phosphorus, and about 0.8 of a tonne of sulphur. And the value of that, if it came back out to you, is around about $10,000 a hectare is what you've got tied up. Now you want that staying there, so clearly we don't want to untie that, and this nitrogen hopefully we'll get for free out of our bacterial systems, but that's about the sort of numbers you're talking about $4,000 worth, or about $1,000 to put 1% organic, 1% permanent organic matter into your soil. A fairly big number. This is something that I got from the Binalong and Bookham alternate fertiliser trial up near Yass. And we can see here that we were actually in our spring total biomass, and this is Pauline Mealy's same functions but multiplied by 10, or Nathan Heap's ones but multiplied by 10 to put them on the same graph. So we actually have very, very similar organic carbons, microbial biomasses, regardless of what system, whether it's a control system, single super. But you can see here that we've produced a lot more out of our single super, but it hasn't showed up in total microbial biomass. I should just go through these quickly. I think mostly they've been handled very, very far better than what I could handle them before. But this is what we really need. Food, water, air, good drainage, habitat, maintenance of our pH limits somewhere in the right areas, and we're going to have reasonable soil biology. And those things basically are what we're going to have for any sort of agriculture. The more we grow, the more food we're going to have, the better drained our soils, the more nutrients they've got in them, all the right things. It doesn't matter what sort of agriculture you've got, all those things are totally related to our farming system. Let me just go into the industries a little bit. The livestock industry to me is probably the best system that we've got around here, at least the conventional one, given that it does a few things. Firstly, that it looks at maximising its productivity, its production, particularly its grass production. That's going to be better to me than minimum input systems that don't maximise this because they don't have the food available. We need to keep the fertiliser rates up, both to maximise the production and to make sure that we've got plenty of material to feed our bugs. It's important that we maintain about 35% clover in our pastures. Now you'll all know whether you're maintaining 35% clover in your pastures. Walk across them, look down, look at the point of your foot. Every third step you should be landing on a clover. If you're not landing on a clover every third step, chances are you're not doing the right thing either by your own productivity or by the soil bugs. So maintaining that sort of level of clover in a pasture system is pretty important. And if you're not doing it, and again, we're looking over the years here, you're probably not getting yourself enough nitrogen into your system to be able to run anything. And again, maintaining soil cover around about 1,000 kilos per hectare for those people who've done systems of, grass systems. You'll know that's about one knuckle of grass always over your paddocks. Crop, however, represents potential issues, particularly continuous cropping. We know that there isn't really a cropping system that hasn't got some sort of declining organic matter area in it, and so we've got to be careful about our cropping systems. We're looking at more increasing soil structure risks and cultivation amounts. Cropping represents a problem and potentially nutrient decline as well. So we've got to address cropping issues, and it's pretty important that we do it. Again, good practices are where we go. Direct drilling and stubble retention to a certain extent overcomes our problems. Doesn't totally, but it's certainly added to our soil structures a lot. Contrary to what Lynn was saying this morning, the only way I've ever been able to increase organic carbon in a cropping system is actually to oversupply fertiliser. So if I actually whack too much on, I actually find that the organic carbon level rises. It's only by doing that I've been able to raise it. By putting on enough fertiliser, I have never been able to do it. In fact, I've probably been able to leave it stable but not go too high. So the only way that I've ever been able to increase soil organic carbon and soil or matter is to actually put more fertiliser on than what I needed, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus fertiliser. Do we need to restrict crops like canola that are what we call biofumigants? There's some evidence to suggest yes, and there's some evidence to suggest no. We don't quite know. And the last thing, of course, is to introduce a pasture phase. Pasture phases are probably the thing that we're going to be best at. And we know what those pasture phases should now look like. We shouldn't be cropping more than 70% of our farms if we want to maintain our biological activity properly. We shouldn't be looking to go too many crops in a row, a maximum of around 5, and mix those up a little bit, so no more than about 3 crops of wheat in that. And we should be looking at our pasture phase having, again, a very high legume content to maintain our nitrogen, but a grass content as well to maintain our organic carbon and to give ourselves plenty of material to brush up. If we do that, the pasture phase is the difficult one for continuous cropping people, and whether we want to reintroduce that, I don't know. At the current price of sheep, I think some people would be quite willing to do it, so long as the price of the ewes come down enough so they can afford to put them on the property. Is organic better than best conventional agriculture? That's what I'm going to say. I don't know. I haven't seen good evidence one way or the other. And the second thing is that, as we all know, organic and conventional is a very wide term. Conventional encompasses a lot of things, and probably organic the same. So is the best organic system as good as the best conventional system? Are they better? I don't think the information's out there to tell us. Quite frankly, I think that the good conventional systems are as good as the good organic systems in terms of maintaining this soil biology. Okay, the best information around about fertiliser products is that they're mostly very good, and it's only when you get too much that can be harmful. Again, I agree with Pauline that all the information I've been able to look at and what my clients tell me is that most pesticides are also not harmful to these things, the least harmful probably being herbicides, and the most harmful probably being drenches. But again, there are safe drenches for dung beetles particularly. This is just some work, comes from Curl up at Manus in about the 1980s, where he looked at earthworms, which was about where we were up to in the 1980s in terms of our soil biology. And you can see here, this is the nil fertiliser treatment. This is the earthworm numbers. This is the increase in earthworms in terms of percentage over nil. High grazing and high P at that site over 5 years increased our earthworm numbers the most. And our low P with low grazing increased our earthworms the least. Now that's about the extent to which we went at that point in looking at what soil biological activity would be in the 80s. but it is some indicator that good fertiliser treatments are actually good for us. Just to finish up with some comments upon the biological products, because I've been collecting trial data around for a long time, so I thought I'd share it with you. And the story, I guess, is that they're a very mixed bag. Many aren't shown to work. They keep on appearing and disappearing, and we've got some real problems with them. This is the trial again from Bookham and Binalong, so I've got to thank the Binalong Landcare Group and the Yass Department of Agriculture for sharing this with us. A number of you may have seen this up at Tim Batberg's trials or at the Holbrook trials from a number of years ago. This is just the more complicated, the final version of it over the time. I've picked the middle site. That's the single super. So this again is increased spring growth over the non-treated trial. Single super. This is agri-ash, which is I'm not quite sure of its components, but it's a material from Sydney water. So it's a manure type material, pig manure, urea, and a number of other materials through there, compost blends. There's a compost there. So there's a lot of alternative fertiliser there. Not a lot of them showing a big increase over just using single super. These are very responsive trial sites, of course. This is some work that Jeff Hirth got me from down near Ballarat North. And you can see here pig manure, standard fertiliser, twin N, and a compost tea mixture, Nutrisol. That's the significance level. In all experiments, obviously, look at what the error is. You need to look at error and say, well, you know, unless it's above the error mark, we can't say anything about it. This is the Harden alternate fertiliser trial in crop. Unfortunately, I can't, because there's some issues with this, I can't tell you which products are which. Again, increase over zero, but they're all fairly small increases, so almost none of these are significant. But you can see here that some of these products, after a couple of years, are starting to give us some reliable positive responses. So it's not as if we're out of the field with products that are all going to be bad. Quite a few of them some of them are actually giving us relatively reliable responses. These two products here are actually Syngenta products. They come from a chemical company, but they're biological products from a chemical company. I don't know what you're going to make of that. In terms of cost, this is some work that I did some years ago, looking at, again, demonstrations. These are 5 demonstrations, just bioag on one side, conventional on the other side. Same yield, interestingly enough. The bioag didn't cost us any yield, and that's confirmation of a lot of other places where we've been looking at bioag systems. But unfortunately, it was a fair bit more expensive to use. So in terms of cost effectiveness, it wasn't particularly good in these trials. Maybe it did keep going. We do, however, see that biological products do work on some trials. We can't give ourselves a total blank saying they don't ever work, because that's not true. This is some work that the bioag people gave me from Lake Bolac, done by AgResearch last year. I didn't copy down that's a product I think called Soil and Seed, and I didn't come up. But it's given quite a good response over conventional fertiliser, which was 100 kilos of MAP, and UAN, so about 35 kilos of nitrogen. So there are products here that may in fact give us some that if they prove to be reliable, might in fact be some way to giving us something. This is a demonstration from last year out at Baldale. It's barley. The product is a best product called TM21. Some of you might know it or might be using it. And that's the line where it was put in. So that's got TM21 on it, that doesn't. Now, there's a bloke by the name of Wodonga hanging around the place who tells us that we've got to have error bars and everything. I don't need an error bar to tell me that that's working. And you can see, go straight up and there's a fair few environments there, and it's actually working, it seems to be working over the whole lot of them. When I went and counted it later on, you can't quite see as well because it was a shiny day, but you can see that's the same line. That's the 0, that's the other one. We basically doubled the plant numbers, and probably the yield had gone up about 75%. So you can see that on occasions these things will work. But this is the Holbrook trial that Jeff Hurth's doing with the Holbrook Landcare group and the Beef Check group and the grasslands. And he's not been able to show anything. So there's single super, there's TM21, there's Nutrasol, but they're all within 2.5% of each other. The graph looks fantastic, but it's very, very short space. So there's no significant difference there. Very high P site. Again, that's the TM21 product with the standard fertiliser. A non-significant response. So sometimes they're responding, sometimes they're not. This is the Rand Landcare Group trial on Angus's property from 2009. That's 10p, that's 10p plus TM21. These were on replicated sites with about a 7% response. So that's the same thing. Why are we getting this sort of effect? We're seeing some responses, some non-responses. There are two possible explanations for this. The first one is that it's that they're doing exactly what they said, they're just not doing it all the time. And the second one is what they call the rogue experiment thesis, which was put forward by a bloke by the name of Doug Edmeades. What Doug did in a famous trial case that he was on when he was trying to prove that the product MaxiCrop didn't work, was to produce an experiment that looked like this. A number of you would have heard Doug Edmeades talking. He's spoken here probably 3 times in the 20 years or so, in the last 20 years. And what he was saying was this is the response that he got from applying 50 litres per hectare of water to a pasture. Now, for those of you who know what 50 litres of water looks like, it's going to do nothing. But these are the responses that he got over enough trials. So what he's saying is that every so often you're going to get a trial right up here that's going to be significant, and it's going to be matched out by a trial right down there. A promoter's dream, because he talks about this one and doesn't talk about that one. I actually think that we do have products that do increase our soil biology, even in conventional agriculture, but that we haven't got anything that responds reliably. We'll see it once in a while, and this then adds to the question of cost effectiveness. If we've got to do it so many times to get something that works, is it really something we want to be doing, or is it too costly? Those are just the messages about that. The important one is if you're going to try something, make sure you replicate it. Do it over a few years, do it in a few different paddocks to see whether that product is going to work, because sometimes it will. I believe that we are starting to get some exciting times ahead. I think that we need, at this stage, to adopt best agricultural practice regardless of what system we're in. And of course that means for conventional systems, doing this, making sure that we're in a mixed system. The most controversial thing is, are we going to return ourselves to a system where we're going to get our nitrogen for free? Now, people like Tim Reeves say that's what we've got to do to go ahead. Nitrogen is going to become too expensive as a fertiliser, we've got to go ahead. So I'm looking forward to the day when I've got a little packet of those inoculums that I put on the white clover for my wheat. And I whack the nitrogen fertiliser on my wheat. That'll be a GM thing, of course, which is a whole nother system. I'm not even going to talk about it. But I'm looking forward to that day when I'm going to inoculate all my varieties and get my free nitrogen. We need to look for consistent experimental findings. And one of the things about agriculture is that it's a small community, and we're not very big, and we hear about all the important things. If you haven't heard about a product, chances are it's not working very well, if it's the first one, because you'll hear about the big breakthroughs. You knew hoe grass was coming along for those people who remember those days. This is not something where we have secrets. And your demonstrations, when you try it, they'll work. So thank you very much for that. I wish everybody very high levels of soil biology.